Is Janet in the room?
I am, Mike. Yep, can you hear me?
Okay, we're in your hands, Janet.
Okay, great. So we have the first panel. I'm delighted to be chairing the first panel here. So let me just ask the presenters for this panel, which is changes in staff development strategies, to just do a check-in to see if we're here. Maybe you can just say hello and put your camera on. We have from the University of Free State, Peter Mosikili. Are you here, Peter? Okay, I'm not sure. Peter, oh, great. Hi, good to see you. And you just maybe unmute. Great. Lovely to see you. Great. Okay, Peter. Then Shanali Govender from the University of Cape Town.
Hi, Janet. How's my sound?
Sound is great. Good, thank you. You can just maybe keep your cameras on for now. And Neil Kramm from the Rhodes University.
Hi, everyone. Morning.
Hi, Neil. Great to see you. Good to have you with us. Derek Moore, who's an independent. Derek, are you here? That terrible moment of silence. I'm just that moment of silence.
I'm just letting him into the room, please. Yeah.
Okay, great. So Derek is arriving. Okay, hi, Derek. No problem.
Hi, Janet.
Hi. Great. Just that moment of silence. Oops, where's Derek? Okay, and Fezile Mlungu from Walter Sisulu University. Are you here, Fezile? I've seen you in other rooms, I think. Anybody see if Fezile is with us? Okay, well, possibly he'll be joining us late. So we have 5 presenters, and the format that has been set up is that each presenter has got 5 minutes to talk about the topic, and then we'll take a few questions from each around the presenters for each presenter's slides and input. And at the end of that whole series, we can then see if there are any common questions that we want to follow up, because it is a panel discussion. And possibly then we'll be able to have some dialogue between the panelists. So let's see how it goes. I have some slides that have been shared by the presenters, but not everybody has sent a slide. So I'm not sure whether, Peter, you're up first, whether you're just going to speak on the topic, or whether you have a slide to share, because it's not in the common slide deck at the moment. Peter?
Thanks, Janet. I did not prepare slides, perhaps I'll speak to, I think
great. You'll speak. I'll give 5 minutes. Great. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Go for it,
much.
Peter.
Colleagues, Firstly, I'm glad, to share the perspectives of the University of the Free State on a topic that has been put in front of us. And also, I acknowledge, the presenters who came first in this group. I think I've seen some alignment, in fact, a lot of alignment based on what we are actually doing from our end in terms of, bringing changes in staff development strategies. Based on this pandemic that we have experienced, a lot has changed. And when I come in, I've started in this role 6 months when this year starts. And then there was a lot of mentorship that was invested on me in terms of, having to make sure that I'll be able to bring changes. So what I have done first with the colleagues, is to come up with a way in which we assist our staff to cope with the needs actually we are experiencing due to this pandemic and beyond. We at first created we had a new academic staff orientation project that we had. So the intention with this project was to make sure that the newly appointed staff, it is actually able to cope with the demands that that they are facing, with working online and making consultations online. So we have collected various materials that the non-academics can use in terms of, how to engage with the students in an online environment. And it has been quite a challenging journey, if I can share with it, provided that the environment was new to most of the academic staff, including the students. But with our various initiatives that we had in place, I think that became quite easier. And through this particular project, that's where we also seen that there is actually a need, to get deeper into the curriculum and assist accordingly. And this actually has bring birth to what Aneri has went through already, of which is curriculum renewal project. And with the curriculum renewal project, the intention was, how can we assist, the academic staff in terms of mapping the curriculum in such a way that it meets the needs of the students who are within the University of the Free State. I think the project has worked quite well, whereby we had to restructure the curriculum in terms of meeting the current needs. And on top of that, we had a teach-on portal. And on the teach-on portal, it is where we had all the materials needed that both students and the lecturers should know about. This portal had relevant information shared in terms of, I can perhaps flag to our learning and teaching environment, if there are any changes. The changes that I referred to that actually have been put on there is a material that has to do, for instance, if one needs to record a session that will share in class, as in from the academic staff. That has been a platform opened whereby all the materials have been shared and so forth. And that actually, colleagues, has assisted us a lot, whereby there's a lot of information where the staff can refer in terms of making sure that they used materials accordingly to improve their teaching and learning. This has also went beyond that, whereby we also looked into, in terms of the leadership, how can one to be self-training driven individual, being a self-driven individual. And this has to come with some element of leadership that we had to share with the colleagues. So now that's where we structured two projects actually that we used to cater that. The first one is a rector's strategic engagement. It was very key for us to have this sort of engagement. This was due to the fact that if the institutions follows a certain strategy, its people or institutional community has to have an idea of where the institution is going. I think with the rector's engagement, it is whereby we had to know where the university is heading, so that our colleagues as well will have a clear idea of what is happening next. That has helped in terms of eliminating the anxiety and uncertainties that we experienced when we all get shaken by this pandemic. And the second project is academic leadership project. With the academic leadership project, that's where we had
Peter, your connection is breaking up.
HODs. So now, with the biggest intention, we just experiencing a load shedding, as we have maybe realized that there was light coming in. Is the electricity is going on and off. I think you'll experience that more often, unless if I can put off my camera so that I can.
Peter, can you also Can you wrap up your presentation, and then people can ask you questions? Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much. We had academic leadership program as well. The intention was to mix in the the newly appointed HODs and the old, the one that have been with the campus for some time, so that they can share ideas on how to make sure that they work in such a way that the staff that they manage or they supervise is able, to work to their level best. So at the end of the year, we also had to recognize the excellence. That's whereby on the various projects where academic staff have been involved, we had learning and teaching hours. And then we also had the conferences, including the fellowship and community of practice from teaching and learning, that we also had to make sure that those projects are in place into, celebrating the excellence that colleagues have brought in terms of teaching and learning. And lastly, we continuously have a strategic discussions whereby we look into what is the institutional needs, and all the needs are shared across all the assistant deans in the faculties, including the teaching and learning managers, in terms of, having to work towards the common directions of the institution. I think I will pause here for now, colleagues. I think that's it from my side. And then
thanks.
Questions.
Thank you very much, Peter. Are there any questions at this stage for Peter? I don't see anything in the chat, but I have one question, Peter. I was going to say one of the sort of, you listed quite a few different initiatives that you're involved in. How much of those were new ones in response to the particular responses to the situation? Because you mentioned things like the teaching awards and the portal and so on. Were those all new strategies, or were some of those just adapted and enhanced?
Those were the adapted and enhanced strategy. What we have realized is that while working in silo, I think we should, at the end of the day, come together and celebrate the hard work that one has in terms of making sure that the staff development becomes a success. Management actually has to keep our staff engaged throughout the initiatives that we are actually bringing into the University of the Free State.
Thanks, Peter. Nicola, do you want to comment? I mean, do you want to speak out your comment there and raise anything about that? I think that is one of the themes of the panel. So please, do you want to unmute and speak about that?
Sure, Janet. So Peter mentioned that sort of strategic vision, and you've mentioned having meetings about it. And I wondered how, different institutions are building that shared vision, shared strategic vision, because obviously that impacts on the capacity. So I'm just, Peter's contribution made me think about that.
Thanks, Nicola. Okay, let's pick it up as a theme through the rest of the presenters, because Peter raised it, and as you say, I think it's something that'll be interesting to hear, compare notes on. So let us, Peter, do you want to comment on that, or should we go on to the next presenter?
No, you can go to the next presenter, Janet. Thanks.
Okay, and then let's pick up that as a theme afterwards. Okay, so I'm going to ask the next presenter, who is Shanali Govender, to present. Shall I share your slide, Shanali?
Janet, I think maybe let me say a few things first before I put the very complicated slide up. So thank you very much, Peter, for your presentation. And I was thinking about how for us at UCT in our context, the specific challenge that we faced in relation to staff development was a challenge around suddenly having to address a much larger group of staff than we'd ever had to before at one time. So when emergency or when lockdown was declared, we suddenly went from having sort of 20 people at a time interested in coming to staff development activities, or 30 people, to suddenly having like 250 people at a single sort of event and running 1.5 of those sessions a day. So our first problem, I think, in terms of what was our staff development strategy going to be, was an issue of mass, scale. Our second problem in terms of our staff development strategy was that not everybody was starting in the same place. So some of the people who were requiring support in terms of emergency remote teaching and online learning design were people who'd actually been doing this for a while and needed to come to terms with the shift in context. Whereas for other people, their primary mode was face-to-face. And suddenly it was that shift of, I lecture well, I'm a good lecturer. What happens when you put me into this online space? So that was how we started to understand the problem. One, an issue of scale, and two, an issue of multiple kinds of needs from staff in the space. And I think that what we came up with was a strategy that in some way had kind of, I'm going to call it 4 steps to it. And these emerged over time. So this is a retrospective. We started with 2 ideas at the beginning that were absolutely important to me. The first one was act fast. We officially started prepping people for the COVID response, or unofficially started prepping people for the institutional COVID response before the institution made a declaration on lockdown or going home. So act fast. I think choosing not to operate on the kind of usual university timeline made a massive difference. Coupled with that, one of the strongest things that I heard from more senior colleagues, I have to say at the time, that came through really strongly, was act fast, but provide comfort and connection first. And I think that that was actually a really powerful choice at the beginning. The idea to, as a strategy, be present, be seen, and at the same time, not just throw information at people, give them information, but also hold the emotional state that they were in. So those 2 things happened at the beginning, they happened quickly. The second thing I think that we did in terms of a strategy for staff development was that we tried to offer something for everyone. And this is something that my unit, I think, has done for a very long time. We've tried to make sure that we work with a full range of staff, everything from, or full range of people involved in teaching and learning, everything from tutors who might be responsible for 20 to 25 students for a couple of hours a week, all the way up to staff who are responsible for entire programs, and then across the kind of teaching professional spectrum. So staff who are actively involved in teaching and learning versus staff who are responsible perhaps for setting up online course sites just in the most basic of ways, or fielding student queries at a kind of administrative level. The next thing that I think that we did that was quite a powerful change in terms of our strategy was we developed a kind of a double up plan. And initially this was COVID driven in the sense that we were also worried that one or another of us would get sick and kind of have to disappear for 2 weeks to get better. That whenever we did something, if we did a webinar, if we did a workshop, if we did any kind of event, there were always 2 people there holding the space. Of course, at various points in the COVID process, we also had the problem of load shedding. So you never knew if somebody would have to kind of disappear to deal with that. And at that point, I think we weren't really very good at having necessarily UPSs, et cetera, in our space. And then I think that the last thing that I want to say that I think strategically that we did was we simply leaned into the uncertainty of the situation. And Janet, what I'm going to do at this point, if it's okay, is I'm very quickly going to share my screen, and I will do this as speedily as I possibly can.
No problem. You've got a minute, so that's good.
Thank you. What I've got in this image for anybody who's interested in seeing what that looks like visually is I've got a range of the different kinds of offerings that we had for people in terms of staff development activities. And I've tried to map them in terms of activities that were learning oriented up at the top. So towards the upper edges are things that are learning oriented, and then activities that were solutions oriented. So perhaps staff wouldn't learn to necessarily do it themselves, somebody would just fix it for them. And I think I want to start by chatting first about the items in this kind of tealy green color. So very often what happened with these is that people would come to us with the sense that they wanted to do some kind of solution, and we pull them into a learning space, or that they wanted an immediate answer and then kind of pull them into a slightly longer engagement. The little stars were items that were actively new or where there was substantial change. So there were learning design consults which were new, a design studio, which is a little bit similar to what Anne-Marie was talking about, which was also new, and then a very strong uptake in our degree program, which was quite a big jump. I mean, the online learning design course not quite doubled, but sort of grew by a half kind of thing. And so those were fairly substantial shifts and changes. And then I think, Janet, I'm going to stop there and simply share the slide in the text chat for anyone who is interested in asking questions about specific kinds of interventions.
Thank you, Shanali. Thanks, Shanali. Does anybody have any direct questions to Shanali at this stage? I see there was a comment from Derek about team teaching and sort of staff burnout. I don't know if you wanted to ask that of Shanali particularly, Derek.
Thanks, Janet. No, just really more a comment, but interested that the folk that seem to be working together kind of were able to bring an energy into the classroom that seemed to not be as depleted as those who were just teaching to a screen by themselves in a class.
Yeah.
I think also what happened was by having pairs of people, you were always, if you didn't, it alleviated for the people holding the space something of the uncertainty. You always had a buddy in the system. And so you didn't have to, in that immediate period of so much stuff going on, you didn't have to necessarily hold all the answers. You could always figure it out in conversation with your co-facilitator or with the group of people in front of you, which was also very powerful. Thanks, Derek.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it might come up as another theme we could discuss is that Shanali mentioned this comfort and connection. And in fact, Mike talked about it in one of his opening comments about the sort of pastoral role. And I think that has been a bit of a change. And that's my impression of the sorts of roles that are expected of people working in staff development. So I don't know if any of you want to comment on that any more or elaborate more on that, because I think it's something we could pick up between people and anybody in the room, in fact, who'd like to comment on that.
Janet, but I'll just come in from my perspective. I think one of the big issues around pastoral care, especially of staff, and my cluster focuses on staff primarily, is that what it actually did in operations was we held back on training, and because we just felt the overload was going to be too much. So it's kind of that balance between, okay, they're really struggling, but we're going to run this thing, we're going to overload them, and then, we need 2 days, no one has 2 days, etc. So it was that kind of balance between, so we've held back on platforms and rolling out self-help and self-directed and training programs, just because of the fact that we think the staff are overloaded, they need the break. It's that balance, just trying to work it out, and of course, not training and stress out, so it's, what do we do?
Janet,
I mean,
if I could comment on that.
Yeah, please, Shanali.
I think that's sort of that distinction between training and knowledge, and seeing our staff participants as colleagues, as collaborators, as people actually that we needed to hold. And in many ways, for me, what shifted substantially in that first period was how we needed to engage with the people who were coming to training events, or how we needed to engage with the people who were coming to learning events. And they were not coming there solely from a place of, I want to know how to set up tests and quizzes on Vula, or, whatever it was. They came with that, and that was what came out of their mouths. But what was coming through in terms of their tone and their bodies and the way that they were arriving in the online spaces was about uncertainty. It was about how do I cope with a new situation. And so again, I want to say that this came as a very strong lead from senior members of our team saying, the first thing we do is we show up for people emotionally. And so hearing that coming through so strongly and was for me, felt like a very different strategic move. First show up for the person, however they are, and then we'll answer, you know, then we will, through that, we get to your query. And that felt powerful.
Okay, it's an interesting issue, which I think has been a shift in our space, if you're looking at the topic of our panel. And I also see that Danielle has made and observed something about the fact that it becomes another role, I mean, enhanced role for teaching staff as well, having to do pastoral care for students. So let's maybe just put that, park that as one of the topics we can carry forward in the discussion if we have time. I just don't want to I want to make sure that other presenters don't get left out. So I think next up is Neil. Neil, do you want to take the floor? Or do you need me to share the screen, or do you would like to do it yourself?
You know, I think I can share.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm a victim of load shedding at the moment. All of my connectivity points are dropping at sometimes, but hopefully it'll last now. I'm not going to share my video if that's fine with everyone. Because that's just going to load more. But in any case, let me get cracking. So, I mean, our time at Rhodes has been interesting. So just to say, we were both, well, let me rather say our EdTech support unit that does the academic development, and we support everything around EdTech, is two of us. Nicola was joined just the year before we went into lockdown, which feels like 10 decades ago. I joined the December before we went into 2020. So I probably had about 40 days to learn everything that's around me, which was a very nice howdy do. But yeah, I mean, we started our prep for how do we support and develop our academics to teach during emergency remote teaching, very much with one slogan, and that was, we're going to build the ship as we sail. And I think that was one thing that we said, I think, in nearly every single session we had, be that a initially face-to-face, then we shifted online, and then we went on to do a lot of asynchronous stuff as well. I think we sat with you know, shared problems that everybody's got, which I think is quite unique at Rhodes, because all of us have many hats here. We're a very small institution. So I mean, just for instance, in our space, we are both academics and support roles. So we've got an academic requirement, i.e. teaching, and then we've got everything else. So that's a shared experience across campus. So many people, many different roles, and we had to think about how do we support people in that way? How do we connect with them, and how do we get them into that? And that building the ship as we sail was really useful. People still, well, a lot of academics still talk about building the ship as we sail. And we really approached it in that way, that, you know, prior to lockdown and emergency remote teaching, there was some departments that really did amazing blended work with some form of online teaching. But for the majority of our first approach, we had to, you know, do the solutionist thing. How do you create a video? Was probably one of our most watched resources, be that live attendance and asynchronous. So that's how we started this. Everything was very much let's build the ship as we go. Going into 2021, we changed that a bit. We did less live sessions because everybody was really overloaded. The context shifted a little bit. We had some more people on campus, and so on. but regardless, we're now looking at, you know, what do we do? What can we learn from 2020, and what can we learn from 2021, and how do we look at supporting academics differently going into 2022? And I mean, at Rhodes, we have a very challenging context. We've got a troubled town. We've got ailing infrastructure, not ailing, just old. I mean, one of our lecture venues is 120 years old, with walls thicker than, I think, 1.4 meters. How do you do? I mean, just to get Wi-Fi in there is nearly a full-time job. So we've got structural issues, we've got, you know, institutional issues, and so forth to contend with. And the plan at Rhodes is that we are all coming back next year and we're going to sing Kumbaya. And, you know, we are looking at, we're in that space where we're going to say, well, is that going to be viable? Is it going to be realistic? And what's it going to look like? And it feels like we're back to, you know, building the ship as we sail, but we can't go back to that. We need to shift into a different mode, and that's, you know, what I think we need to be the lighthouse in the storm now. How do we get people to rein in their expectations, but also to plan better for 2022, and harness what we've learned. So I mean, our approach is going to be, you know, very much centered around just-in-time resources. What we've learned through 2020 and 2021, if we do things too early, our academics forget them by the time we get there. So it puts strain on us. And as I said, we are two. We do team teaching as well. So that puts an additional strain on us. We also weighed up, you know, synchronous versus asynchronous. If something is really important, then we would go synchronous. Or if it's a new strategy or a new software that we are trying or implementing, we went synchronous initially. And then we created, you know, a lot of asynchronous resources for that. We are still, you know, also trying to remind colleagues, and our own thinking is that the future is uncertain. You know, there are talks of fourth waves, fifth waves, you know. So how do we then deal with that? And how do we deal with that when that comes, without, you know, dealing with it while we're surfing? So it is something we have to really think about. We also plan on doing a lot more. Let's share our experiences. There are pockets of excellence, and it's been challenging to get colleagues to have these discussions. You know, their diaries are too full, teaching loads are heavy, research requirements haven't dissipated. So how are we going to deal with that? And that's been one thing that we have been talking about and really trying to grapple with. We're also more focused on departments instead of one-off solutions. How do you create a video? I don't think those type of sessions work for us anymore. So we want to rather engage with departments and say, well, what is your context? What is your discipline? How do we foster a mode of practice between colleagues? And we all know that sometimes very easy to say, but we are dealing with a herding of cats situation. Some of our colleagues literally only started using PowerPoint in the beginning of 2020 when we said lockdown. Big panic, big panic. Another thing
Neil?
that yes.
Neil, will you can you wrap?
Just
finish your last point, then we can see if there are any questions.
Sure, I'm going to wrap up, and the last thing we also have to look at is communication. Everybody's over communicated with, so we adapted our strategy to lower communication, but more meaningful. So just in time type stuff. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Neil. I think everybody really appreciated that lighthouse metaphor. I can see that becoming a commonly used in our circles, kind of giving guidance and a sort of safe harbor. I think that links back to the point we were discussing about comfort, connection, and pastoral care. Thank you very much. Are there any questions or particular queries for Neil on his presentation about the work at Rhodes with some of the particular challenges he highlighted, and a very small team? Gosh, Neil, it does sound like you guys did a lot.
Yeah, yes, it's Fezile Mlungu. Yeah, I wonder if I can comment.
Hi, is that Fezile? Are you coming on? Are you wanting to make a point?
Yes, I just want to support Neil on what he's saying regarding the issue of staff unavailability for academic support. You know, they're just not available. Like it's the same case that he has at Rhodes, the same case we have at WSU. They're doing research, teaching and learning, community engagement, and there's no activity that dedicates them to do academic support, especially in terms of educational technologies capacitation. So I wish I can say I'm glad that I'm not the only one who's facing this kind of issues.
Yeah.
And I don't know the solution.
Sounds very challenging, Fezile.
Yes,
I mean, I think Neil also, Neil was talking. I think Nicola also commented about using OER and being kind of smart about what you focus on. I thought it was interesting, that comment. I don't know if either of you want to comment, Nicola or Neil, and respond to that.
Yes, yeah, it is really about focusing on what's going to have the most impact, and that's why we took that just-in-time resource approach. People, you know, academics need certain things at certain times, you know, and it's about focusing on what we are going to do at the most relevant time. And hopefully that coincides with what academics want, but that's why we also use that strategy of synchronous and asynchronous. So we built up, you know, repositories of content to support them, and we've made that OER, it's available for anybody who is using Moodle, if they're interested. And you know, that's one way in which we can at least see that. And I mean, I actually track that. Once we send something out, we can see an uptick in academics going to that site and actually going to look and engage with it. And I mean, we implemented another tool so I can actually see how long they are engaging with that content. And it is a meaningful amount of time. So that's been our strategy. But you know, it would be so much nicer to have people in a room and have these robust conversations with them, which you can't always do in that online space to the same extent. You know.
Okay, thanks. I'm going to, I'm sorry, someone wanted to speak?
Yes, Peter here.
Hi, Peter.
Yeah, I agree as much with what Neil has indicated, having to look into our dynamics as well. I think just in time resources is what has been, you know, what we actually had to operate on our side with the asynchronous resources or some, you know, repository data spot whereby we put everything that actually our colleagues needs. You'll find that though the information is there, not all the time colleagues will go there by themselves and stuff. We'll see, you know, having to call you now and then and so forth. And mind you, what I also seen here is that across other universities, the staff development team is quite smaller. We are also a team of 5 that works across campuses, and that has put more pressure on us. But however, what we do, you know, continuously having to check what is actually happening across the different times of a semester, you know, based on what the actually lecturers needs. That's where we find that it's quite important to have sort of an hour or less or 30 minutes, you know, training whereby we take staff throughout the materials that actually place there in our teach on portal. You know, when information is there without being communicated to it, like this stuff, don't use it, and it won't help you in such a way that you try to balance and reduce the time staff spend, you know, that they can spend into the workshop and so forth, provided that most of staff don't have much of time, as Fezile has indicated as well. Thanks.
Thanks, Peter. Okay, that's definitely another theme, is how to provide support, given there's often a very few members of staff doing the support role. We'll flag that as part of our discussion in maybe the next few presentations. So I'm going to ask Derek now to talk to us. Derek, do you want to go ahead and share something or just speak?
Thanks, Janet. Can you put the slide on the panel?
Yeah. Just give me a minute.
Hi, everybody. So I must admit to a bit of survivor guilt over here, because I am not in an institution anymore. I'm independent, and I am my own boss. And so that does mean that I haven't actually been involved on the front line to the same extent as you guys are, and I recognize all the exhaustion and trauma, and I feel it vicariously, but I really haven't had it to the same extent, I think, as I see of my colleagues. But having said that, I have been working quite hard on trying to approach this issue of staff development at scale, and build on work that I did with Pretoria University in 2015, 2016, 17, in response to Fee Must Fall. And so let me speak firstly to that. And then I'll talk to this diagram that I've got in front of you, and then I'll go back to that as well, because that work that I did in 2015, 2016 with Pretoria University, I attempted to get DHET to buy into it with me, and sadly there's been just chaos over there, and so I've got a whole lot of work that is waiting to be deployed, but just is not being taken up, which is a little bit frustrating, as you can imagine. Okay, so what we did in 2015, 2016 was we asked ourselves, can we find a metaphor that really works? And Neil, your lighthouse was a lovely metaphor that you used. What we did was we tried to adopt a metaphor that we called the umbrella. And the reason why we called it the umbrella was because it took on the tool that we created took on the shape of an umbrella. And so if you look in the chat, this is the tool that we created, and it had 8 panels in the umbrella, and those panels, if I can cheat over here and enlarge my document, I'm not sure if it's going to enlarge in real time on your screen. Those 8 panels were assessment, teaching and learning strategies, learning activities, content, communication, administration, design, and support strategies. And in each of those 8 panels, then lecturers had the option to actually assess their own assessment, or self-assess their own assessment, or self-assess their own teaching, learning strategies, or learning activities, blah, blah, blah. And then they were able to, once they finished working through the tool, create an umbrella that was filled or unfilled in certain panels. And what this did was then it gave the lecturer an area or an idea where they might want to improve their work, or an area where they realized there was gaps. So you'll see that in the chat I've added a link to the tool. Estelle was responsible for designing this tool, and she did a fantastic job of it. And I think if you play around with it, you'll see how it works. Now let's jump then to this diagram that you've got in front of you, where we talk about novice online educators and experienced learning designers. And I think what we know as learning designers or education technologists, or whatever you want to call the hats that we've got on our head, we have got a base to draw on. We have architecture, patterns, and heuristics that just kind of seem to pop out of our brain because we're familiar with the field. Whereas people who are moving from offline or class into online straight away, they really had the choice to replicate their face-to-face teaching, or maybe to focus on one particular aspect, like communication or support or assessment. And what this tool then allowed them to do was it also offered them a lot of resources that they could refer to, and those resources then I collected in what I called a field guide called the Open Umbrella, and the link to the Open Umbrella field guide I provided in the chat as well. And again, that is where, thanks Janet, 1 minute, that is where they could draw resources from. But having talked through all of this to you, I can't say whether it worked or not, simply because I wasn't ever on the front line of it, because I didn't get to roll it out as I had hoped. But I would appreciate some of your thoughts, and I'd appreciate if you would do 3 things for me. The firstly is to go to the tool and see the baselines in action and see if they work for you. They can be changed, and I think if we're talking about a strategic vision, then it makes sense for the actual institution to decide what are the specifics they want under assessment or learning activities or whatever. The second step I'd like you to do then is look at the field guide, the link that I've sent as well, and check it out. And you'll see on the top right, there's something called Hypothesis. Hypothesis is a little app that allows you to actually annotate text. And on the top right-hand side of the screen, you'll see there's a little page button. It allows you to actually annotate the resource. And so what you would do is you would highlight and you would actually comment on what is there. And those annotations would be really helpful for me. And I appreciate if the information is confusing for you to tell me why it's confusing, or if it connects to your own experience, highlight it, or engage a discussion using it as well. Okay, Janet, that's my little explanation of staff development.
Okay, thank you very much, Derek, and thanks for those links. Does anyone have any immediate responses or questions for Derek on his presentation? So he's given us an umbrella. We've got a lighthouse and we've got an umbrella. Any thoughts about the umbrella approach to support? Okay, so I think maybe people need to take a look at that, because you've asked us to do a couple of things, to look at the tool and look at the field guide. So maybe people can have a chance to look at that a bit later and make comments on the hypothesis annotation tool. Derek? Okay.
Thanks, Janet.
Okay, maybe there's something we can pick up that crosses the input from Derek and the others. I think it's probably a lot about kinds of support we can provide for teaching staff in this environment. But maybe we'll do that once we've heard from the final panelist, Fezile. I think you're going to be talking to us next. So let's just
Can I just make the point that the reason why it's called the open umbrella is because it's full of open resources that are licensed under Creative Commons. And so the resources there are for people to draw on and to use and to adapt and change as the license.
Thanks, Derek. And it links back to the point we're making about when we're under pressure, OER are incredibly helpful. So you're saying to us there's a whole repository of OER that have been developed for this purpose and we should look at them. Is that right, Derek? Yeah. Okay, thank you. That sounds very useful. We'll have a look at it. Okay, Fezile, are you ready to talk to us as the last panelist in this lineup, and then we can see some themes arising?
Yeah, I'm not going to talk much because I think I've already touched on many things in my presentation. But what I can learn from this panel discussion is that we suffer from the same fate, which is like understaffed. Many academics who needed assistance after, especially in response to the COVID-19 challenges. So I think our main challenge, though, is the unavailability of staff to be capacitated on what we do as academic developers, to support them, to capacitate them. And then I think what I have thought of the way of approaching this in my institution is to actually have a situation whereby there is a partnership between the academic developer, which is me, and the faculty management, as well as the lecturer. So there must be 3 stakeholders who will be involved in this, so that, because as an academic developer, I'm not employed. I'm not employing and also not managing lecturers. They are managed by the faculty management. So the best approach maybe could be to say, faculty management, I want to train these lecturers on this particular time, on this particular technology, for this particular reason. Because when I go to the faculty management, obviously, then my work must be supported by the institutional vision to say, I want all our lecturers to be able to use education technology by 2025, for example. So when you actually come with an approach that is supported by the vision of the university and approach the management, then they begin to want to prioritize the, your intervention. But then again, one of the challenges that people they can go to the training, but then you find that there's no action further on. As I said in the presentation, you'll find that we've got manuals, self-help courses, video clips, and all those kind of things. I mean, they will just not go there. But then they will call you maybe some day to say, now I want to know how to add a quiz. But then, I mean, I trained you on number 2, the resources are there, but then it's not like they want to be helped when they want continuous practice and be familiar with the tool, but they just want to use it when they want to use it. So if, for example, they want to add an assignment, I show them how to add an assignment, then they won't come again and say, by the way, I think I'm going to need a quiz now. How do I add a quiz? And I can just perfect this before I add the actual quiz. They'll just say, no, you know what? When I need to add a quiz, Mlungu is there. I will just ask him. Now, if you are like me, we are the only e-learning specialist in the campus with about 300 lecturers. I mean, there's no way that I can be the go-to person, or I could be there because I'm required to be the go-to person. But then it will help to have people actually be able to drive themselves towards what they want. But as I have listened to the presentation here, it looks like I don't know if maybe we need to have some kind of a structure as academic developers where we debate these things frequently. We share these ideas and then we share these challenges and we'll come up with an approach, because it looks like they affect us all. But lastly, I could say in our institution, the best way to to actually monitor, to track and monitor lecturers is when we then invite them to the grassroots events whereby they showcase what they've done. Then after that, we then invite them to the VC's Teaching and Learning Excellence Awards. So at least there's some kind of a reward, intrinsic reward to what they are doing. I mean, just to also encourage them as well. So for now, I can stop there. There's nothing much I can say.
Thank you, Fezile. I think you picked up on quite a lot of the themes of the other presenters. You know, your issue around the just-in-time support. That's usually what teachers are looking for, and the difficulties of people making the time for training. It's something was discussed in several of the presentations. So we have a few minutes left for discussion. I see there's Fatima is making a comment. Fatima, in the chat about Sadie's open resources. Do you want to tell us briefly, do a little promo for those? So I think we've been talking about trying to find ways of you know, being smart about the time, and there was something similar to Derek's point.
Hi, Jen.
No, hi. No problem.
I just wanted to alert folks to the freely available resources there on the Sadie site. Not
You're very quiet, Fatima.
Sorry,
that's better.
Sorry, I wasn't prepared to talk because I know
no problem.
I'm having problems with my mic today. But anyway, yeah, I just wanted to alert folk to the site. There's a couple of resources, or rather courses, that people can do on their own, you know, their free time or so. And it's specifically geared towards a low remote context. So some very helpful courses there, as well as our publishing tool. So the publishing tool allows you to input a Word document, and you know, it gives you various options to provide easily formatted material. So that's more on the materials development aspect.
Great.
But I
Thanks,
think more
Fatima.
importantly is sorry, Janet, if I just also could add there, the issue of the teaching presence coming through in materials development is often lacking when we go online. And Sadie focuses a lot on that learning spiral, which I think is very, very helpful when you're designing courses, you know, at a remote level. So just to embed that teaching presence in materials.
Great.
So, yeah.
I think it's probably linked as also about the point Daniela raised about how to make compassion and care visible in your online materials, teaching and design. Okay, so I think we've got 2 minutes to go. So what I'm going to try and do, and I'd like people to put this to respond to me in the chat. I was trying to like do a very, very quick sort of summary before the next panel, because I think there were really interesting issues coming up. It seems to me like Peter and Fezile picked up the issue of trying to look at institutional support for the work that we're doing, and that relates to the question of staff development strategies. Like, how do we make sure that whatever's being coming out in our context is supported and responsive to the institution? And in your point, Fezile, that you need sort of faculty management and leadership to be encouraging, I think, teachers to take advantage of these. Although I think issues were raised about people's overburdenedness and time, and I don't think we're ever going to find a resolution to that. But I think being sympathetic both to ourselves, sometimes having a very, very small groups of people doing support, as well as the teaching staff who are pretty overloaded. So from the point of view of you know, resources and trying to find what's already available and making use of OER, thank you for the fantastic sharing. I think that was really great. And trying to find just-in-time and responsive work. Then Shanali raised the issue of comfort and connection, which are really coming through as a theme from the beginning of Mike's opening around pastoral care and making sure that there's actually support for people emotionally in this very challenging time. And I guess the lighthouse metaphor and I suppose the umbrella really help us here. So I think that the sort of staff development and training, both as a need and how to do it in the way that's most useful, is one of the things that I thought. Yeah, and how do you design against burnout or for burnout and fatigue? I don't know, Daniela, if you have a last word on the matter, or anybody else who would like to. Use of the word training, yes, professional development, learning. So it's about not telling people what to do, but finding ways to enable and build capacity. I agree with you, Derek. Anybody like to come in with a last second, have a last word. I'm inviting you.
I find it really interesting, the question, can we design? So is much of the fatigue and the burnout that we are seeing due to bad learning design or missing learning design? Could one design better? And if one designed better, would that impact on the kind of fatigue and burnout that we are all feeling? I wonder about that. If it's just learning design or what else?
Probably linked to other things, but thank you. I'd like to thank all the panelists, particularly for the stimulating inputs. Thank you, everybody. They were really, really great. I think very, very interesting overlaps and dialogue there. Okay, I don't know who's next up. Is it you, Mike?